Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. It is once again I, the notoriously sanctimonious Robert Meyer Burnett. I got to tell you, being a lifelong geek, you just never know when stuff comes down the pike where you just shake your head and go, I've been a lifelong geek, but I'm seeing things I never thought I would ever see ever, pretty much. And whether that's the scope of a medieval battle like we saw in Game of Thrones last weekend, or the unbelievable worldwide success of Avengers Endgame, which we'll get to in a little bit again. It shouldn't surprise me, but let me lay this on you. According this week, while talking with MTV's Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, Ron Howard, the director of such things as Solo, a Star Wars story, the Dan Brown adaptations, the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, Inferno, one of my favorites, Night Shift, A Beautiful Mind, Apollo 13, Gung Ho. I mean, Ron Howard's been making movies for a long, long time. One of my favorite directors, a populist director, to be sure, but he confirmed that Solo co-writer John Kasdan, son of, well, the great Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote, of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Empire Strikes Back, along with Lee Brackett, and director of movies like Body Heat and Silverado and The Big Chill, Grand Canyon, among others. Solo co-writer John Kasdan is in the midst of serious discussions to bring a sequel TV series to Disney Plus, a sequel TV series to the movie Willow. Now, for those who might not remember Willow was also directed by Ron Howard and, of course, famously produced. It's a Lucasfilm film produced by George Lucas. And basically, it was a big budget fantasy epic. It had Val Kilmer playing a character named Mad Mardigan, who I actually liked, and Joanna Whaley, who later became Joanna Whaley Kilmer, his wife at the time, was in the movie. There was Jean Marsh played Queen Bavmorda, who was basically a version of Maleficent. I mean, it was Tolkien light, but I liked it. I like Willow, but I never thought I would see or anyone ever talk about a Willow sequel. Disney Plus is apparently getting on that, and they are making a Willow sequel. That is unbelievable to me. I'm astonished, and it hasn't happened yet. As always, I say, take things with a grain of salt. Believe it when you see them. You never know in the shifting sands of Hollywood what will happen. As a matter of fact, I was contacted last night about a certain major project in my own life, not Free Enterprise 2, that I thought was, let's say, in hibernation. Somebody just called me up about it randomly. Somebody I'd been talking to, a year ago. You think things are done, whatever. They're never really done. Nothing is ever done. It comes back with a furious vengeance. I mean, we're getting a Dark Crystal streaming series, and we're going to get a Willow series. I don't know, people. Anything is possible. We're living in the Wild West. The imagination connoisseurs that you are, you, the members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I don't know if it's a collective unconscious or some kind of Jungian thing. I mean, some kind of Mandela effect. I don't know. But we are conjuring imagination connoisseur greatness. Well, at least we hope it's greatness. But it's just incredible what we're getting. And sometimes it doesn't turn out so well, like the revival of the X-Files series. But at least they're trying. And sometimes we might get greatness. We're getting a season 4 of The Expanse, after all. Amazing. So that's just off the top of my head. That's what I couldn't believe it. And I once again, if you ever needed an indication that we live in crazy times, look, I didn't even know that one day I would get this model kit of, as I keep saying it, the EVA pod from 2001. I had no idea that I would be able to get that, much less that there's secondary parts companies that are making lighting kit pieces and all that. It's just it's unbelievable, which I've been playing with. I have a fetishistic attachment to all of the things I'm going to use to make that model kit. It's not a very hard model kit to make, but the whole key is to light it up and make it look good. Couldn't even imagine. I mean, we're getting everything, people. These are wonderful times that we're living in. If you're an imagination connoisseur, I wanted to point out that this podcast is now brought to you by, as you all know, Lucky Tiger. Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for men who want to look good and feel great. I actually lay on the I used it this morning, but before I came on, I'm sorry I haven't washed my face with Lucky Tiger Men's face scrub, but I do love it. And you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community can now get 20% off if you buy anything at getluckytiger.com by using the code PGS. When you go to their website, getluckytiger.com, and purchase any of their great products, which I've become actually a big fan of. I've done my interview with their president, Alan Murphy, which you will be seeing shortly because it's become part of a larger podcast I'm doing for them and part of the show as well. So that's pretty damn cool. And as always, as you all know, I've been starting these shows off with letters from the Post-Geek Singularity community, letters from you. And you can write me letters, send them to me at my website, theburnettwork.net. And please, if you do send me a letter, be sure and tell me whether it is okay to read them on the air. And I want to start this one off with a new viewer, a new member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. His name is Sean Reed. Sean writes me and says, "Dear Rob, I recently came across your work a few months ago on the John Campea show, and I've recently become a subscriber to your channel as well. I'm writing today to share with you my love of geek culture and how it literally saved my life. In 2004, I began to have health issues, and doctors discovered a large mass in my arm. And they initially told me the only treatment was amputation. But I didn't expect my world but I didn't accept my world crashed. I was in denial. But I didn't accept my world crashed and I was in denial, and I closed myself off from people since I was unable to work. I eventually got to the point where I considered ending it all just to make the pain stop, but my family pulled me from the brink. A few years later, I started forcing myself to go out and do things again. I started by seeing a movie called Iron Man, and for a while, the world didn't matter, and the pain wasn't so bad. I was hooked on it like I was on Star Trek The Next Generation growing up. Then in 2010, I decided I could live with the doctor's decision on my arm. I could be a part Iron Man in my own way. Only this doctor was different. He had a different plan, and they were able to resect the mass and save my arm. I had hope again, something to look forward to, and not only did they save my arm, I came away with full use of it, minus a lifting restriction. But ever since, I've been able to go out and see new movies of the MCU, all 22, and chatting with the people in the community now as I get more comfortable. But I watch you, John, and the lovely Ashley every chance I get, and I stop by for your Robservations now because I feel less alone in the world. Also seen Avengers Endgame with my mom, and I'll leave out the spoilers. But I'm not ashamed to admit it took on a roller coaster ride from hell to cry time. Anyway, I'll close this in saying thank you for all you guys do, and bless you and Doshi too." Thanks. Sincerely, Sean. First of all, Sean, sorry I didn't read that as well as I usually read things. I mean, I'm getting better. Reading things aloud sometimes can be difficult, but I want to thank you for sharing that. I'm getting a lot of letters from people whose imaginations and their imagination connoisseurship have saved their lives, have given them a reason to live. And I have to tell you, I used to joke. I mean, I guess this was glib and a little flippant when I was a kid, when I was in high school. I used to tell people in junior high when somebody would actually, by the way, this was probably not the best thing to do. I admit this now. But when I was a kid, when somebody would say, they were depressed or they might have been feeling suicidal, my answer was always like, you can't kill yourself. Another Star Trek movie is coming out. Now, again, I didn't mean to be glib or flippant, but It was sort of I didn't know how to deal with it. You know, I was not very comfortable with my emotions when I was younger, but that was what I would hope would put a smile on somebody's face and at least make somebody laugh. But in a way, there was some truth to that, because in my mind, people used to always accuse me of, well, why are you always so happy about? Why do you like everything? Why are you always excited? Why are you always smiling about everything? I get that. I still get that, actually. And even now, when life has happened to you, and I've always said, as I've said to people before on this podcast, I'm like, look, you know, going to Sunday school when I was a kid, I met so many people with green numbers tattooed on their wrists. I realized that nothing, no matter what was going on in my life, aside from what Sean just mentioned, having to lose a limb or have terminal cancer or something like that. Well, Gilbert too. What could be worse than, you know, being in a concentration camp and surviving the Holocaust? I always thought that, you know, but everybody's lives are different, and I understand the circumstances. But Gilbert, come here, buddy. I don't know why he's barking, but circumstances like that, these kinds of flights of fancy, have kept me going. They keep me excited. When I log onto the internet and I see, you know, I read that, by the way, on Dark Horizons. I go to Dark Horizons every day. I really like Dark Horizons as a site. It's basically an aggregate site. They do reviews, and then Garth Franklin, who runs it, I've been a fan of, I don't know, 2 decades. I've met him a couple times. I really like what he's doing. I go to Dark Horizons in the beginning. You know, it's one of I check out every morning the BBC, CNN, the Drudge Report. Yes, I try and, you know, it's just an overview of different points of view. And I go to Dark Horizons and Deadline. I sort of have these sites I just check out to see what is the news of the day, kind of a thing. NPR, things like that. But so that's where I found the article about Willow, and it's their top headline right now. And I'm like, my God, you know, if you were having a bummer day, even if you don't like Willow, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of Willow, however, I do have to say that there's a creature in Willow called an Ebersisk. It's a 2-headed dragon, and it was named after Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, which I always thought was cool. And Ebersisk. Gilbert is here, and Gilbert is look, do I need to give you cookies, buddy? I know people don't like Gilbert's part of the show. Some people write me and they don't like Gilbert. Come here, buddy. You want a cookie? Here, you can come up here. You have a cookie. And people say they don't even like the sound of him chewing. I do. I think it's great. But he's part of the show. He's kind of my unofficial co-host. He's always here, right, buddy? You're always here, buddy. Here, dude. Anyway, we live in amazing. Okay, you can have one more, and then you have to go. I'm constantly amazed by the world we live in and the things that we're getting. And there are cynics. There are cynics that can say, "Yeah, but you're just a slave to corporate entertainment and all that." Well, there's certain truth to that. Yeah, we are. But movies and television that we love are very expensive to make. So by definition, you're dealing with corporately held entities, and they're willing to figure out how to borrow money from banks to make a $350 million movie like Avengers Endgame. I don't know if that's the exact price, but we're living in amazing times right now. And the array and the variety of stuff happening. I heard a rumor, more than a rumor. I can't even say what it's about, but I'll give you a hint. There is a crossover. It's become an event. And I won't say in what media or medium. There's a crossover event that we're used to experiencing if you're an imagination connoisseur and you like certain things. And this year's crossover is so bananas. I mean, the plans for it were so bananas. I'm like, I don't even know if that's going to happen. But it it was told to me from someone in the know. They told me this thing could happen, and there's still lots to be worked out. But I'm just listening to, my jaw was on the floor. I'm like, if that were to happen, even if you're not the biggest fan of it, I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've probably ever heard. Endgame was cool. It was amazing that even this is even being considered, and the machinations are running. And again, I can't say anything more. I know I'm being a dick about it, but I can't really say what it is. I really can't. But it was insane, even for me. I'm like, that's some crazy shit. But they're trying to do this thing that I assure you, if it happens, it is awesome. And the things that we're getting, even though we don't like things and we can be critical of things, and everybody's angry all the time, but it's still I tend to marvel at it all anyway. I mean, they're trying, and we're getting, the Wheel of Time series. We're getting Good Omens. If you guys haven't read Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's novel Good Omens. I say New Omens, Good Omens. The book is incredible. I mean, I read the book, I want to say, God, it came out like 25 years ago or something. But Good Omens is an incredible novel. We're getting a Good Omens television series on May 31st. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And what I love as a big reader, I love that we're getting this stuff. We're getting literary adaptations. That's what, not just comic adaptations, but I couldn't believe the Umbrella Academy and how much I liked the adaptation of that show. But man, I mean, Good Omens, they're shooting Dune and they're confirming that it's going to be 2 movies. We'll wait and see about that. But wow, we're living in these great geek times, and I Willow. There's a Willow show. I'm stunned. On another note, for anybody who's interested, we found out yesterday that Tango Shalom did not get into the Seattle Film Festival. Very kind of sad about that, having worked on this movie for a very long time. But it always goes to show you, I learned something new. It's best never to submit a film to a film festival that isn't finished. And our movie just wasn't, it wasn't color time. There was no sound mix. So it wasn't finished. And we're in the final processes of finishing it. My final color timing sessions are Monday and Tuesday. I'm very excited about that. I love color timing movies. And I also want to give a shout out to, for those of you who are interested in Skyfighter, the short film that I edited with Lucas Kendall, who wrote and directed. There is an Indiegogo campaign running now. He wants to make a Blu-ray, which we weren't really planning to do for the movie. So if you go find the Skyfighter Indiegogo campaign and you're interested in getting a Blu-ray of the short that I edited, it's up there. Check it out. This next letter comes from David Atkin. Let's see. Oh, Nerf Herder. Pardon me. David Atkin. Well, he is Nerf Herder 21. Here we go. Hi, Rob. As a massive fan of Tom and Jerry for all of my life, and having owned a VHS here in the UK in all of their uncensored, unaltered greatness, and it came to my attention after upgrading in the 2000s to DVD that the DVD where censorship, e.g. the black maid's voice, was changed to the white-sounding non-Deep South voice. Other bits cut out were sections deemed racist or slightly offensive, mostly from the middle-aged white MGM staff, probably. So a few years ago, I saw MGM release Tom and Jerry, the complete unaltered episodes, on Blu-ray and remastered. So I thought, brilliant. The first volume came out, all good. But when it came to the second volume, it got, I guess, pulled back and canceled because of an episode called Mouse Cleaning, where Tom gets blown up and covered in soot, which makes him look like a stereotype of a black person. It annoyed me that MGM promised to release these uncensored, then because of the woke world today, got scared about a backlash that doesn't really exist. As the old saying goes, if you don't like it, don't buy it. Warner Brothers have the rights, which they've now put a warning before saying about the way cartoons were drawn back in the day. Also, Disney Plus will be catering to the woke crowd in that they will be cutting the crows out of Dumbo, etc. I think this is wrong, that the companies are pretending all of this content deemed racist for today's folk never existed. It's important to have these records of history so everyone can watch them and see what the world was like and how we can be better. Sorry for the long letter. You can read this on Robservations if you want. Dave Atkin, member of the Post-Geek Singularity, Nerf Herder 21. Well, Dave, I want to thank you for this letter. You know, I've been getting a lot of letters about this, and we talked about censorship and things and how times change and how we should be mindful of the world. And I've received a lot of people saying different things to me. And I don't, first of all, it's not an all or nothing proposition. It's a very nuanced conversation to have. And I think, you know, I've always believed, and I've always said, you should never trade one oppression for another. that people, voices that have been marginalized or oppressed over the years, when they finally get their chance to speak and society starts to change and evolve, those voices who were once marginalized should not then be able to then, oh, they're going to oppress their oppressors. That is a never-ending circle, and it doesn't work. What we all need to do is move forward together where all voices are respected. Now, we, especially in this country, it's not so long ago that we had Jim Crow laws in the South. And as I've always said, any Black Americans will tell you they have never achieved equality. Walking into a convenience store at 2 o'clock in the morning, if I was standing outside with a Black friend of mine and we just tried an experiment and they walked in and then I walked in, I'm sure the reception is a little bit different. That's just the way of the world. Is it good that it's like that? No. Do we have a long way to go? Of course. Now, when it comes to this kind of art, I am in agreement. I think that these things should not be changed, because this idea that we've always been a great people that have been so socially aware makes little sense to me. As I've said, human history is one long, big, gigantic, grinding charnel house of atrocities that we've committed against one another. And hopefully we eventually are getting better. And indeed, the evidence supports that we are getting better. We have more people, have more voices available to them now than ever before. Our technology is allowing. Does that mean that people are still being discriminated against? Yes, absolutely, every single day. And can it be better? Yes, it can be better. And there is all kinds of, look, we have tremendous poverty all over the world that we really are not doing as much as we should to thwart. I saw my friend Carrie David, my dear friend Carrie David's film Breaking Their Silence, about women on the front lines of the poaching war in Africa. Her film had a world premiere this past weekend at the Newport Beach International Film Festival. She also made a documentary called Bill Coor's The Will to Live. And this documentary, it literally was women all throughout Africa who are spearheading the efforts to conservation of I think the 4 animals. It's hippos, elephants, tigers, lions, the great apes, and giraffes are the big poached animals there. And what was really interesting that it was sort of an underlying point in the film was that these animals are the ecology, like when, say, a rhinoceros knocks down a tree, for instance, that knocked down tree becomes part of the ecosystem that develops around what happens with a knockdown tree, and provides all kinds of both food and shelter and all kinds of different things to the rest of the animals. And it's all part of the same ecosystem that I've always talked about as well to people. I mean, we're in a closed system, and the idea that we think we can pollute that closed system and we don't affect it at all seems absurd to me. But anyway, we have a long way to go. And I do think this is a very interesting. I'm passionate about preserving our cultural legacy, good or bad. Do I think that there should be Confederate statues and Confederate flags all over the place? No, because of what the Confederacy symbolized. They were treasonous. I mean, it was all about secession. It was all about, holding on to states' rights in order to keep people in bondage. But that doesn't mean that these same statues shouldn't be in a museum someplace and contextualized so people understand what was going on and where we came from and where we shouldn't go. That's why I think, the Shoah Foundation, or whether you go to Holocaust museums, it's the same kind of thing. I wouldn't ever want to pretend that the Holocaust never existed, although some people think that, or that we haven't landed on the moon. Some people think that. And it's important that we preserve this cultural legacy, good or bad, but it should be contextualized. I mean, that's just, I think it's important. I think it's a very, very important thing. And I want to thank David for you writing in and telling me your thoughts about Tom and Jerry. A lot of people have been writing me about Tom and Jerry too. I don't know if it's like a cultural zeitgeisty thing. Is there something going on with Tom and Jerry that I don't know about? Maybe there is. But Tom and Jerry are just the tip of the iceberg. And of course, the famous thing going on with Dumbo, they're going to edit out the black crows and the feather, and they're for the racist portrayal. And I've said that the Siamese cats in Lady and the Tramp are probably on the chopping block or things like that. But we just have to be. It's a tough one. I mean, it is a tough one. But I do believe at the end of the day, we're better for it if these things are contextualized and explained, so we understand where we're going, where we came from, and where we should be going to. Because you can never have too many reminders of that. This letter comes from Michael Lasco. Just wanted to shoot you a message to clear up the time travel element in Endgame based on what's currently accepted as a theory in physics. There isn't a plot hole at all if you view it this way. Now, I've been getting, I think I've got at least 30 letters from people all about the Endgame time travel theories. So if you haven't seen Endgame, I would imagine most of the people here probably have already seen Endgame. But if you haven't, you might want to duck out. But I wanted to read this because, man, do you people want to talk about time travel in Endgame? And I do too, so why not? The Ancient One explained it exactly right, but not completely. When traveling to a past time, any changes made in the past creates a new timeline to be created. This is true. However, the one fact that wasn't mentioned that is also true and clears up any plot holes is the fact that making a choice in the present also creates a split in the timeline for each of the possible choices you have made. Let me use Endgame as an example. Steve goes back in time to live out his life with Peggy Carter, and it seems inconsistent that he should be in this same timeline. This is not inconsistent at all. Once he is faced with this decision, two separate timelines are created. The first timeline is where he decides to return to the present, and the second timeline is where he decides to stay in the past. Since the timeline we are currently on is the one where he decides to stay in the past, for this timeline, he has always existed in the past from the time he traveled back until the present day. The split in the timeline happened the second he arrived in the past and acted on this decision. This means that even during Captain Marvel, there was a Steve Rogers running around who appeared in the past at a certain point in time and was living in that timeline up until the present day. As for Gamora and everyone else who came from the past, once they made that decision to come to the future, they created a new timeline diverging from this one, where that point on, they do not exist past the point they left. With that said, it would be possible to go back in time and grab Nat so she doesn't die. That decision, if they chose to do it, would create a new timeline where she didn't exist after that point, and thus the future of that timeline would play out differently, not ours. That said, it's easy to explain why in this timeline they didn't do it, because this is the timeline where their choice is not to, and concurrently there is another timeline created where they do go back and bring her to the future. I hope this clears things up. If you have any other questions, you can email me. Well, Michael, I want to thank you for that. Here's the thing. Here's what I love you guys. I love all of these time travel theories. And what I find very interesting about all of this is time travel is, of course, a theoretical construct. It does not exist. There are people have talked about time travel a lot. You can read all kinds of different physical, the physical sciences have addressed this potentiality for a long time. But I am tickled to death by how many emails and theories I've received from people explaining it all to me. And what's so great about it is you either get everyone's time travel theories are completely shaped by the media they've watched. Then some people's time travel theories are mixed with a combination of quantum physics and all the media they've watched. Because after all, the entire concept of time travel was born out of science fiction. I mean, I think it's an innate thing that we all wish for. Like, don't we wish we could have done something differently and changed the past? I mean, we all do. So it's it's almost like a primal need of ours. Like, damn it, I want to be able to go back and change the past. but we can't. And yet it's the ultimate wish fulfillment. When time travel is done right, I mean, in my mind, time travel is best when it's presented in a very simplistic manner. And I think Back to the Future does it correctly, really, where the idea that you're on, and you know what, it's funny, I'll be honest, as I drifted off to sleep last night, I was watching The Butterfly Effect on Netflix. I don't know why. I was thinking about The Butterfly Effect, and look, there it was. So I was watching it. Didn't really work for me again. I forgot how lurid that movie is. The Butterfly Effect it's kind of a lurid little movie. I didn't realize I'd forgotten. But most time travel, I think the time travel that we most know and love is the time travel that says there's one timeline, and if you go back, that one timeline can get changed and bent. And that's it. And there's this one timeline, and it's the timeline you're screwing with. There's no quantum timelines because every decision you make, although quantum physics, I guess, would say that every decision you make, you could have made 100 million different decisions or whatever. I don't like that idea, to be honest. I'm going to tell you, my favorite version, my favorite flavor of time travel, as it were, is the one timeline. I like that the best, because that to me is the most fun. When you have too many possibilities with time travel, like with Endgame, I think it gets a little convoluted. However, it doesn't bother me, and I love Endgame, and I love how they did time travel, because I'm like, oh, okay, they're going through the quantum realm. That's different. That's more of the parallels, the TNG parallels timeline kind of idea, where there's all these different timelines. But I'm a single timeline kind of guy. If you go back and screw up the past, you're basically effed up. And that's why I like the grandfather paradox. How does that work? It's more simple and clean. But then you have the grandfather paradox, and well, wait, how does that work? Well, I mean, what are we as an imagination connoisseurs going to do if we don't have these kind of conversations in our late night drinking sessions? If we can't talk about this stuff. Anyway, let's see. Let's see if anybody. Terry Flynn asks a question. And it's funny because I was just going to read a Terry Flynn letter. Terry Quinn's question. Terry Flynn says, not Terry Quinn, the O'Quinn, the actor. Terry Flynn says, "Hey Rob, will there be a life-size?" Oh, Terry. "Hey Rob, will there be a life-size Captain America's butt? I'd buy it. Maybe Vesta and Willow too, though you'd have to ask them." Well, I don't know, Terry, because you're in the UK, and that would be America's butt. So could you actually get one? I don't know. I've always thought, in my case, I've always thought Americans, especially if you've got a butt like Captain America's, it's pretty fit. But I would imagine that we have a store here in LA called the Pleasure Chest. I'll leave it up to you. It's a sex store, and they have pretty much everything you want. And I will bet you within the next 6 months, you probably will be able to buy an America's butt at the Pleasure Chest. I maybe not, but perhaps you can. And I will keep you abreast. I'll keep you up or behind any current events that come up as far as Captain America's butt. Not a bad idea. But Terry also sent me a letter, which I'd like to read. This was good. This refers back to something I was talking about earlier in an earlier chat. "Dear Rob, your comment about checking out your parents' Beethoven records after watching Star Wars got me thinking. Let me be clear, these were my mom's Beethoven records. If she watches this, I want to make sure she knows I'm giving her credit. As someone who played in university orchestras at places like Cambridge and sang in a national choir, classical music has always been dear to my heart. The point I'm about to make is probably esoteric, and in the deluge of letters you're now getting, probably not a high priority." You're wrong. When you say esoteric and not a high priority, I'm like, oh, I'm going to read that. However, I inevitably found the score of Endgame interesting, not least because it is by Alan Silvestri. Incidentally, I hope he laughed at the Back to the Future jokes. John Williams and similar composers, when composing main themes for a lot of big uplifting films, often wrote in the key of D major. For those who don't know, before valves were invented for brass instruments during the time of Mozart, D was the only key they could play all notes in the scale. It is also naturally a bright key, useful for marches and other such music. Alan Silvestri wrote the Avengers main theme in the key of E minor. That is a key that, although pretty uncommon in, say, Beethoven, is the key used in several of the most profound romantic symphonies of composers like Brahms and notably Rachmaninoff. His second symphony is one to potentially induce tears. When watching Endgame the second time, I paid much more attention to the music and its contribution to my moist eyes. The subject of mathematics of music is one that is as contentious as that of time travel. Yet, even without necessarily understanding the maths of why certain keys induce emotion in humans more than others, good composers simply know that some keys do. Alan Silvestri gets it. That main theme is unmatched in capturing the pathos and emotion of the Avengers as a group. Silvestri has gone from his days in major keys like D to a much more nuanced E minor and captured our feelings in a way that puts him up there with Williams and Goldsmith, but in a way that moves us forward to embrace subjects such as loss, redemption, the fight against fate, and ultimately victory. Bravo, Silvestri, you've done it again. Whilst I doubt Endgame will win any of the Biggie Oscars, best score is the one it deserves. Kind regards, Terry. Well, that was fascinating, Terry. I did not know that. I mean, I am a huge fan of obviously film scores and classical music. And a good friend of mine, Brian Lawrenson, is a DJ here locally on KUSC. Actually, you can listen to him internationally. Write Brian Lawrenson a letter. Tell him I gave him a shout out on my YouTube show. He's a great guy, and I frequently go. He frequently introduces the LA Phil, and we go to a lot of events at the Music Center, the Disney Music Center, and the concert hall, the Walt Disney Concert Hall, and see shows because of him. So I want to give him a shout out. But I didn't know that. See, I mean, again, you members of this, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, I learned as much from you, and it's fantastic. I didn't know that at all. So what a fascinating thing. And Alan Silvestri, I never think that he gets his due amongst film fans as a composer. Of course, people know his Back to the Future theme. Dun, 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 dun. I can't do it because I'm cold, but something like that. But that was really fascinating because I love his Avengers theme, and that's now. It's funny now. I want to go see Endgame for a fourth time and experience that, and with just listening to the music. What an interesting comment you made, sir. So thank you for that. Sky Amazing Guy says, "Robobo, my man, Endgame changed my life." Well, I'm glad it did. That's I've never been called Robobo. I've been called Rob Bob, but never Robobo. Mr. Robobo. It's like a Styx song. Chinese Deadpool says Christopher Marcus is interested in a Moon Knight movie. Okay, I read that. So for those of you who don't know, Christopher Marcus and McFeely were the writers of Avengers. They've been writing a lot of the Marvel Universe movies, especially Captain America. And he did say that he wanted to write a Moon Knight movie, as a lot of you might know. I love the character of Moon Knight. I specifically like the first Moon Knight run. And what got me into the character of Moon Knight was the Doug Mensch and Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight from the early 80s, which was one of Marvel's first direct sale only comics. I love that run. Moon Knight has been changed as a character over the years, and he's become this sort of schizophrenic character of late. I'm not sure how there's been some great Moon Knight comics over the last decade, but my first favorite incarnation of Moon Knight is the Moon Knight from Doug Mensch and Sienkiewicz's run. But yeah, it excites me that they're going to make a Moon Knight movie. Willow Yang says the Kirk Spock line. Somebody asked us, maybe you did, Willow, about Kirk. There's a line from Kirk and Spock on today's John Campy show that I didn't immediately recognize. Willow Yang says the Kirk Spock line from Breaking Bad was where Badger was telling Skinny Pete about his Star Trek script, which involves a pie eating contest. I remember that. I just didn't remember the line. That's okay. It's good to know. Stub McShave says people wonder why I reread books. I do it for the same reason you watch or rewatch a movie, or look at a good painting, or listen to a favorite song more than once. I agree. I mean, I've reread books. I like rereading books. I read so much stuff and watch so many movies and so many episodes of television. If enough time goes by and you pick up a book again, even though you vaguely know where it's going, it's all new again. And as you get older and change and move through life, books are different. I mean, one of my favorite books is Donna Tartt's The Secret History. And I love that book. And I think I've read it 5 times probably. And it as I get older, it means something new each time. I really want to see the movie. But I agree with you. I think rereading books is great. Although it's funny because I do feel a little guilty because there's so many books I haven't seen. Same when I rewatch a movie. There's so many movies out there that exist. I'm like, man, I should be watching something I haven't seen. But when there's a level of comfort in that I like. I like rereading and rewatching because you see things you haven't seen before. And I know there's things I'm going to die, and there's going to be hundreds of movies I haven't seen and millions of books I haven't read, and that'll be a bummer. But hey, as long as you're reading it all, I think that's a good thing. Fergal Kelly says, Rob, the actor who plays Podrick in Game of Thrones, says that he often gets grabbed in the balls by fans, and not a word from the Me Too woke people that he didn't make a big deal about it. But imagine the other foot. Yeah, I know. But here's the thing, dude. Here's my thoughts on there is no equivalency. Like, if men are manhandled, we've basically spent thousands of years of human history abusing women, taking what we want, raping, pillaging, just basically being horrible, not just to women, but to other men too. So, if a woman grabs a dude by the balls, if it's like Beatlemania, if some girls are running down the street, let me tell you, I mean, some do, I guess, but women are just, it's not the same. It's just, there is a false equivalency. Women have been victimized. They're still victimized every day. It's not the same. We're not equal. I'm not saying that we should be victimized. Men shouldn't be victimized, because don't trade one oppression for another. But still, we gotta. And if you're an actor on a famous show, and you're a handsome devil, it's you put yourself out there. It's not the same. You can't say it is, and even the meaning of it is different. And we've got to accept that, I think. But I understand. I don't think it's good anybody puts their hands on anybody, unless it's wanted. I mean, I welcome all kinds of touching from the opposite sex when it's something I desire. But when it's not, even the hottest girl in the world, if she's putting her hands on you and you don't want that to happen, it shouldn't be happening. Period. Raven is here. Raven says, I mentioned this on John Campy's show, but he said we would get a $3 billion movie before a $300 million opening weekend. I disagreed. You were right. You disagreed. You were right. Yes, I did say that, actually. A $300 million movie is far more achievable for an opening weekend than a $3 billion movie. I usually am right. I'm kind of a box office sage like that. I mean, sometimes I'm wrong, but it becomes, there's also, I've been studying the film business since I was a kid, literally a kid. So, there are certain things, a $3 billion opening, I just don't see that there's even enough theaters in the world to do that. Like, there's just not enough venues on the planet yet. But a $300 million opening, as we saw, was achievable. And thank you for that. Rob Crawford says, I've been meaning to write, what is a 4K movie? All right. Well, I can tell you what that is. Basically, you're talking about 4K. You're looking at pixels, the size of an image. And for instance, the movie that I'm working on is the Tango Shalom. Its proper pixel aspect ratio is 4096 by 1716. So it's 1716 pixels wide, and it's 4096 pixels this way. Now, that is 4K. That's what that is. Now, there's different aspect ratios. The 4096 by 1716 is a widescreen 4K aspect ratio for a widescreen movie. So, I mean, this is a tough. It gets crazy to explain, but an aspect ratio is how long the picture is by how tall a picture is, basically how wide, like this. So there are many different aspect ratios. Television, the way television used to look, was 133 to 1. So it was 133 units wide to 1 unit. So it was, like that. Basically square, although it's a little wider. So that was what that aspect ratio is. In the digital world, and by the way, that was also called Academy ratio. So when they were making movies up until basically the 50s, all movies were essentially square. There were some exceptions, but for the most part, they were square. Now, when we move into the digital world, when television went into the digital world, the size of the actual image would change based on like the television image was 640 by 480, right? I think it was 640. So 640 by it was 640 by 480. So that's what the aspect ratio was with a digital image, that many pixels. Now we live in the 4K world, and that was standard NTSC broadcast format. So television used to be 640 by 480, not so good, or that's pixels, and or was it pixels or lines? It was lines of horizontal resolution. See, I'm getting all confused. But now in the 4K world, we now have 4K images with the widescreen images. True 4K is 4,096 pixels. So that's big. I mean, that we came from 640 by 480, and now we're at 4,096. And in the case of a real widescreen movie, 4,096 by 1716. So that's how big the actual file size is. Each frame is that size. So that's what, I mean, in a nutshell. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this, but it's really interesting when you go back and you look at things. Now, for instance, high definition, there's different forms of high definition. 720, for instance, that was the first HD. You go up 720, and then 1980 by 10, or 1940, 1980 by 10, 1080 by 19, whatever it is. I'm a little stuffed up, but if you go look, it's basically pixel. It's pixels. That's what it is. But the movie that I'm working on now is in 4K. We're finishing it in 4K widescreen, which the actual aspect ratio. Let me explain one more thing, because I didn't do a very good job of this. An aspect ratio is units. So, for instance, 185, which is what most films are shot that aren't widescreen, means for every 1 unit tall something is, it's 1.85 units wide. Now, that is essentially what widescreen TVs are now, or 16 by 9. It's really like 178 to 1. But what was really interesting is when they decided to make widescreen televisions, which we all have today, that were no longer 133 to 1. When they decided to make widescreen TVs, they did not settle on the 185 aspect ratio that movies were being made in. They decided on basically 178 to 1, which was sort of strange. So even when you get a movie that's 185, it's teeny bit cropped, unless it's perfectly cropped. But then you have things like Panavision, as we would say, 235 to 1, like Die Hard, or the Star Wars movies were 235 to 1 or 239 to 1, depending. So it's 1, 2, 2, and then 35 to 1. So that's a widescreen image. That's an aspect ratio of the actual screen size. Now, when you're talking about a 4K image, you could have a 2K image, for instance, that's the same aspect ratio with less pixels. But a 4K image, if you wanted a 239 to 1, which is a widescreen image, so it's 239 to 1, which is a standard widescreen format image in terms of its aspect ratio on film, not including the pixels. To create that for a 4K image, because now we're talking about a digital image, you can have that aspect ratio, but then you're dealing with 4096 by 1716 pixels. That's what creates the 239 to 1 image. I'm going off in the weeds here, and I'm sorry. But anyway, so Tango Shalom, for anyone who's interested, is 4096 by 1716. It's 4K widescreen. And that is the standard 4K widescreen image size. I guess ultra widescreen. Rob Crawford says, I've been meaning to write. What is a 4K movie? Oh, I just read that, just explained it. I don't know if I did a very good job, but there you go. Factual Opinion asks, still waiting for the Winds of Winter book, you and the rest of the world. I think George R. R. Martin might get on that. I think he would probably get that finished. Mark C. says, I love Beethoven. Even more so, I love the storytelling of Holst and Wagner's music. Hey, man, I'm a huge fan of Holst's The Planets. I mean, I grew up with that. And Wagner, like I was talking about it, the Ring of the Nibelung cycle, Das Rheingold, Tristan and Isolde, Götterdämmerung. Really like those stories. The stories of the planets, and the story of the Ring of the Nibelung. Grew up in Seattle where they performed the Ring cycle every year. And one year they did a sci-fi version of it, which was pretty cool. Rob, I love you 3000. You're proof that we can collect toys and be nerdy and still be successful and awesome. It's really funny. Today, there's this guy on YouTube who has like 15, not on YouTube, on Twitter, who has like 15 subscribers who came after me and came after Trek Yards. And this girl that I don't, she actually blocked me on Twitter when she was complaining that it was the cinematographer who made the decision about the Game of Thrones episode this week. And I said, no, you're not entirely correct. And I tweeted her an explanation, a technical explanation of what streaming services are dealing with. And she blocked me for that. But then this guy wrote me back and he said that me and Trek Yards and one other person we're materialists. And because we collect things and that we're not espousing the philosophy of Star Trek or something. And I'm like, I'm not to me, materialism is like if brands mean something to you. Look, I do like my Tom Ford cologne, and if I was a little thinner and in better shape, I'd love to wear Tom Ford clothes just because I like them. I don't need to tell somebody, go, hey, man, I'm wearing Tom Ford clothes. I mean, I like Hot Toys action figures, not because I think that they're cool to own. For me, they're the best action figures that I've ever had in my life, and I particularly like them. I don't need to impress anybody. Materialism, if I didn't have Hot Toys figures, who cares? But I like being nerdy and be successful and awesome. I'm not entirely successful, and I don't think I'm entirely awesome, but I appreciate you saying that. Because that's that would be, I mean, I try. I failed miserably at times in my life, but I try. And I want to do better. I'm always trying to do better. Darth Suthius says, been married 11 years. My wife hardly ever grabs mine. Darth, that reminds me. That's very funny. And by the way, you sent me an email and I was going to read it and I just clicked off of it. So I'm sorry. But thank you for being here. And, you really shouldn't wait for your wife to grab yours. Perhaps you could, sort of go a little Barry White with her, sing songs or seduce her with a nice dinner, take her on a date. Let's see. APC says, was it a mistake buying the Infinity War Thanos toy over the Endgame Thanos toy? This is a question I love answering. Okay, so here's the thing. Hot Toys made a Thanos toy. It's 6 scale, so it's going to be like this big. You see that? It's big. And they also are making an Endgame Thanos toy. And the difference is the Thanos in Infinity War wasn't wearing his armor. He was wearing armor in the flashback scenes, like when he first meets little Gamora. But for the most part, he wasn't wearing his armor. When you see him in Endgame, he's always wearing his full suit of armor. So the question is, they both come with an Infinity Gauntlet that lights up. So the question that APC is asking, was it a mistake to buy the Infinity War Thanos because he doesn't have the armor? Or was it better to buy the Endgame Thanos? And I don't think you can take the armor off. And let's face it, APC, if you're like myself, and I know you are, you have to have both. Got to display them both, right? That's first of all, the Infinity War Thanos has hit other places, but in the States, it hasn't really arrived. Where it hasn't arrived, it's I've been waiting for it. It hasn't shown up. But I think getting them both. But what's a real bummer is if you bought the Thanos from Guardians of the Galaxy that came on the throne, the chair that's small. The size wasn't correct because they didn't know. So consider yourself, I don't think it's a mistake. You're going to love having that Thanos. You're going to get it. I mean, I've seen pictures of it. It's fantastic. Roberto Suarez says, what's your take on the Indiana Jones franchise? I think the mantle needs to be passed down to Short Round. Have Steven Yeun play him as an adult. Well, first of all, that's not bad, having Steven Yeun play Short Round as an adult, but isn't Hae-Kyu Kwan still available? He'd be, what is it? It's been Temple of Doom came out in 1984. First of all, I love the Indiana Jones franchise. I love Raiders. I love Temple of Doom. I mean, I love Raiders more. Not a big fan. Everyone's going to be like, oh my God. I'm not a big fan of The Last Crusade. I think it's a little sloppy. I think the visual effects are B-list. ILM was a little too busy back in the day. And sure, do I like seeing Sean Connery? Yeah. But I don't like what they did to Sala or Marcus Brody in that film. I think that movie's flippant. To me, it's the Return of the Jedi of the franchise. A lot of people like Jedi. I'm not one of them. Magic K says, what do you prefer, Bond with a lot of gadgets or tough guy Bond? Well, the gadgets to me, I like the gadgets. Like, I love the cars. I like the Lotus Esprit. I love the DB5, the Aston Martin, and the submarine car, and Little Nelly from You Only Live Twice. But the gadgets are fine when they're more spycraft gadgets. I did kind of like the armor piercing shells in Moonraker when he had that thing. But too many. I want the gadgets to have some verisimilitude to be believable. I think that would be that's the best Bond gadgets I like. I like something that feels real. Like miniature lasers and stuff and watches. That gets a little too much. But some like a garrote that comes out of a watch. That's kind of neat. Because I could believe a wire could wind up inside of a watch. You could hide it in there. But I like tough guy Bond. I like my Bond to be rough and tumble, to kick ass. I mean, one of the great things about Daniel Craig is I love Casino Royale. I don't think the other Bond films he's done have been particularly, they've all had certain problems. Casino Royale seemed pretty tough, and I loved Casino Royale, but I like when he can fight, when he can kick the shit out of people. I never believed that Roger Moore could really be scrappy the way that Sean Connery and the way that Daniel Craig could. And it was interesting. Timothy Dalton, even George Lazenby, I believe, could put a beat on down, but he could beat down somebody. I mean, I like that. Bond needs to be able to kill somebody with his bare hands. That's why you have a license to kill. So you can literally choke the life out of them. I remember we bought a Sony 32-inch flat panel TV when they were first introduced for $1,300. Now you can get a 60-inch for like $500. It was all about Sony then. Well, Darth, let me tell you, for me, it's not all just about Sony. It's all about the best picture. I don't own one, but I want to get, if I could get any TV, I'd want to get like a Panasonic OLED 77-inch, but that's like $12,000, and they don't even sell them in the States yet. You can get OLED sets here, but not a Panasonic. That's what I really want. LSSJ Alpha says, next film to have a $300 million opening, maybe in 15 years. Also, you think we'll get a Sam Wilson Captain America movie? I don't. I'm curious. We're getting a Sam Wilson Winter Soldier TV series, an 8-episode series from Disney Plus. I don't know. It's interesting. Sam Wilson can wield the shield, but he's not a super soldier. So he couldn't take the pounding that Steve Rogers could. Bucky is, of course, also a super soldier. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we'll get a Sam Wilson Captain America movie. I don't know if he can necessarily, within the MCU, he has in the comics, can take up the mantle of Captain America. He'll probably get killed. But I don't know. That's an interesting question to ponder. I'm not really sure about that. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Darth Suthius goes on to say, Jupiter from Holtz might be my favorite single piece of music of all time, and it's very iconic. It's very majestic music. I agree. I like all of the planets. I mean, I really do. They've been used. Cliff Idleman adapted the planets for Star Trek 6, which is really cool. I'm a big fan of course, that music. It's great. Christopher Sanchez says, Rob, I find it hilarious that a lot of the people that say they don't care about plot holes say so through clenched teeth and snarky, annoyed tones. Well, also, and I think that there are people that call things, I agree with you, first of all, but there are people there's a lot of people that call plot holes that aren't necessarily plot holes, like Clint's phone ringing after the unsnapping, and he comes back. He gets the phone call from his wife. Like, how did the phone? That to me isn't a plot hole, because that could be. It's funny for genre fans. There's got to be that suspension of disbelief. Like, I believe it doesn't violate anything. It doesn't violate storytelling rules to believe that Clint Barton would be carrying around the same phone he had, or maybe it's a new phone, but that it would still be connected to either his wife's cell phone or even their landline. If you look where they live, I'm sure they could have had a landline, and he just has his wife's picture come up. You don't know. So that doesn't seem unbelievable to me. A plot hole is something to me, like, for instance, in X-Men 3, it literally from one cut to the next goes from daytime to nighttime when they're on the bridge at the end, the battle at the end. How does that happen? I'm like, come on. That's just bad continuity as well. But a plot hole is something that you can't explain, that you're like, wait, what? If something doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. And when you're talking about time travel, it's very interesting because people, I find the conversations about time travel in Endgame hilarious, because everyone thinks they know how time travel works. And it's charming to me. It's charming that so many people think oh, let's talk about how time, and this is how time travel works. I laugh at that. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's very funny. I'll toot my own horn. I edited a movie that's on Netflix. You can watch it. It's very low budget, but it's a time travel movie, and it's called Paradox. And it was written and directed by Mike Hurst, as kind of an homage to John Carpenter and James Cameron, but made for a fraction of any of their budgets, even their lowest budgets. And their lowest budgets 40 years ago. This movie was made for less than that. But it's a time travel movie. There's another thing called Paradox that's not the time travel movie. But if it's still, I think it's still on Netflix. It's a cool little time travel movie that I edited. And we were playing a lot with logic in the time travel logic in the movie. We spent a long time talking about it. And when you start talking about time travel, when you've ever worked on something that has time travel in it, everybody thinks they know how time travel works. It's very funny. And you sit down and you start having these conversations, and you get in debates. And what was interesting about Endgame is they flat out tell you time travel is very different, that your present, when you travel through time, becomes your past, and you can't change your past from your future, because the time traveler, by traveling through time, is traveling into their future. Even though they might be jumping into the past, they are still moving through time. So it's to go into the past is their future. So the only place they can return to is their past, which is the point they left from. That's a rule that if that's the case, everything must be extrapolated from that reality. And then, of course, you're going through the quantum realm, which changes it up. But it just cracks me up about how people think time travel works. They're like, no, this is how time travel works. I love that people actually say that. And I've had conversations myself with people, because I've said, no, you don't understand how time travel works in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as if I know for sure. But it's kind of great. But plot holes. What is a plot hole? I think plot holes are something that can't be resolved. It's just something that somebody forgot. Like, for instance, if you're in a Fast and Furious movie and the tires on your car pop, and then suddenly a couple frames later, or a couple shots later, whatever, an hour later, the tires are fixed again. Is that a plot hole or continuity error? I don't know. Maybe that's a bad example. But, there are plot holes. There are real plot holes, and then there are fake plot holes. I guess that's my take on it all. Algernon Radish says, Rob, thoughts on the Russos, writers, and Marvel giving us that first in Endgame ballsy move? Also, my 6th viewing will be in 4DX. Is it worth it? Well, um, that first hour in Endgame. Look, I think that the reason Endgame is such a good movie is the first hour is something that was necessary. I mean, the question that we all ask is, once Thanos snapped his fingers, what does that do to our world? And by let's take that to the next level. What does that do to all the worlds? The universe would be put in a state of disarray. I love that they spend an hour. The first hour of Endgame is dealing with the ramifications of what happens to the world when Thanos snaps his fingers. I mean, it sucked, and you have to deal with that. You have to set that up, otherwise the rest of the movie is meaningless. If they had just started, you're not dealing with that at all. Yeah, let's go get Thanos or whatever. You have to do, because that's, by the way, that's one of the most interesting parts of the whole situation about what he did philosophically. It makes the movie rise to a different level. I think you couldn't have made Endgame would not have worked had you not spent the first hour dealing with the ramifications of the snap and what was lost, because we have to know what the Avengers are fighting for and what they've gained. I thought that was great. I love that. I thought it was terrific. Revenge asks, favorite Batmobile? West's, Keaton's, Bale's, Affleck's, Adam West's. I grew up with the Batmobile. I love the classic Batmobile. And here's the thing about the original Batmobile from the 60s, Adam West, what did it run, 3 seasons? That car drove on real city streets. When you saw it in the show as a kid, I was like, wow. I love Michael Keaton's. I have a 6 scale Batmobile from Burton's Batman. Oops. As I'm spilling water, hopefully. I love that Batmobile, but it's like it can't corner. I mean, it literally needs like pitons and shoots wires to corner around. I mean, it was completely, the design was cool from a aesthetic standpoint, but as a practical, it just didn't work. Whereas the 66 Batmobile still is badass. The Ford Futura wings, I love that. I had the Corgi toy. I think it's great. I love it. But it was practical. I believed in it. Now, I love the Tumbler in Nolan's Batman films. The Batmobile, the Val Kilmer Batmobile is kind of cool. Clooney's but they just don't work. You don't believe that they could ever chase anything, much less be nimble around the city. I did like the idea of the Tumbler. I thought that was interesting. And Ben Affleck's Batmobile, again, just my favorite Batmobile, to be honest, is the Lamborghini that Bruce Wayne had. That to me is a Batmobile. If I was Batman, I'd be driving around a Lamborghini. That's what I'd be driving around. And, so you could actually get out of it and leave it on the city streets and people don't know it's the Batmobile. I mean, with a Batmobile, it's always a target. But if you have a cool Lamborghini, who's going to blow up a Lamborghini? Just an asshole would. Rakan Man 85 is here. Rob, the Infinity War Thanos also comes with a fixed bent arm to keep from creating the rubber skin that hides the joints, and it looks good in my DTOF. You already have it, huh? Damn you. That's good. The fixed bent arm, is that the one with the Infinity War gauntlet in it? Because I want that figure. I mean, I pre-ordered it, but it might not come till June, which is great because my birthday's coming up and I can probably use, if my mom sends me any money, I'll have money to buy it. Noel Ryan says, I may not have believed Roger Moore was a killer, but he's the Bond I think would be most or the best to have a drink with. Well, he might be. He might be, but and he would have probably great stories about all the women he bedded because he was a Lothario. I mean, he was the guy. To me, he was the Bond that loved the finer things in life, the champagnes, the ladies. It's not that the other Bonds didn't, but the rough and tumble Bonds, like Connery, as much as he liked his ladies. If you remember the scene in Goldfinger when he throws in the opening scene, he throws this woman to take a blow that was meant for him, and it knocks her out. Like, I don't think the Roger Moore Bond would do that. He wouldn't. But you're probably right. Roger Moore might be more fun to have a drink with, but I bet you that Sean Connery had better stories to tell. I actually have a Sean Connery story, a great Sean Connery story that I know is true that I can't tell in this chat, but it's very funny. And if you ever see me in person, ask me to tell you the Sean Connery story. It certainly wouldn't fly in the Me Too era, but it's very funny. Terry Flynn says, "Do you feel you were too nice sometimes? That you could have been big if you'd been more arrogant?" Happened to me. Wondered if you encountered it. That's an interesting question. Um, yes, yes. I mean, I haven't told like Hollywood stories like I did at the beginning of these chats, but yeah, I mean, my problem has always been I've been too much of an eager fanboy. Like, oh my god, isn't this so great? Like, blah, 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 blah. Like I haven't spent enough time directing my energies and being. People want to believe that film directors or film producers are these magicians, and a lot of them aren't really nice. But my nature has always been, I mean, at least I like, there's some girls that beg to differ, but that my soul is one of trying to be nice to people. And I've always believed that in working on movies, that's the primary, I had a good life growing up. I mean, I was very social. I had lots of girlfriends. I've always worked at jobs I've really liked. So I've had a good time. So when I've worked on films, it was always my belief that we're all here to do the same thing, that we're here to make movies. And I've always believed that if we make the movie good, then everything else will follow. If you want to play Joe movie producer and go, meet young actresses, if that's your thing, that's great. But make the movie first and make the movie great. And that while you're making a movie, you don't need to throw around your weight because we're trying to make the film. Well, I found out very quickly in this business that isn't the case. There's a lot of people that get into the entertainment business for the perks. So for me, it's always been the movies. It's always been the process. I mean, my satisfaction comes from making the finished thing. And this business is designed to, so many of us are to thwart that, to not get there. And yeah, I think if I could have been more arrogant, and I've always believed, people have told me that I've wanted to believe. I've always believed in, like, I've never understood. It's so hard to make movies that I've never understood why people stand in their own way so much in this business, that they let their egos. There's so many projects that have been torpedoed that I've been involved with by people's egos in the front of the process as opposed to the back of the process, and it's frustrating. And if I wish that I had achieved enough commercial success in my life, and maybe, look, I'm not saying I've given up either. I'm still making things. I'm still working on films. Like I said, a project came out of nowhere and got resurrected last night. You never know where it's going to go. But if you are in a position, there's a reason why a lot of people are pricks in this business. Especially, what's interesting is some of the most successful people in this business I've met have been very, very nice people, because the people that have been in it and have longevity, there's a reason why they have longevity in the business. But yeah, you could be an arrogant prick and throw your weight around and get more done if you've achieved that kind of success. Because once you're really successful, no one can take that away from you. You can always use that. You can always be bankable. But even like I've always said, Mel Gibson, when he made Passion of the Christ, he was Mel Gibson. He made Braveheart. He couldn't get Passion of the Christ made, his passion project, because nobody wanted. They told him that no one's going to watch this movie. Well, what did he do? He went and spent his own money, made it himself, and made himself $1 billion. So, I mean, it doesn't. This business is totally crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think that my happy-go-lucky attitude is either sometimes misconstrued, resented, or I come off too much as a fanboy, as opposed to a professional. Even now, like, as I'm taking this film through post-production, people don't know. I've worked with people that they're like, oh, just the other day, a friend of mine was told that my work on his project was good. And I think there's a kind of I mean, he knew it was, but he still sees, I mean, my life is not even being on YouTube talking to people. I'm sure there's lots of people that go, that guy's not serious. Well, I mean, it's like, this is a side hustle. This has become a gig while my making movies and doing what I want to do my whole life is a side hustle. It's like my friend Darren Scott once said that we've all become professional hobbyists. Normally it's very hard to build a career in Hollywood anymore, because unless you're working at a huge level, even TV writers are not making the kind of money that they used to be making. It's really hard now. It's a crazy place, but I can't fight my own nature. I'd rather be having a good time and have a smile on my face than be a prick. I really would. But it's a good question. I mean, it really is. And I apologize. I've been fighting this cold for days. Fergal Kelly says, the they used the Dragon Ball Z time travel concept. I am shamefully unaware of Dragon Ball Z. I mean, I know what it is. I've seen all the action figures. I've just never watched the show. I don't know what a Super Broly is. I don't know. Other than don't make the joke, it's Vic Mignogna. I know that, but I don't know what in the context of the show what it is. I do not know. But yes, Racanman85 says, "Yeah, Gauntlet arm is bent. You'll love it. Laugh out loud." I can't wait to get that Thanos. I mean, I remember getting the Hot Toys Hulk, and I'm like, this is huge. Can't wait to get that. Raven asks, is there any rhyme or reason what days you and Ashley are going to be on John Campia's show? Oh, and it's Raven like the bird. It is not. I thought it was some anime thing. Okay, Raven. I apologize for saying Raven. I thought it was some cheeky thing. So Raven, it is Raven, just like it says. Raven, is there any rhyme or reason to the days you and Ashley are going to be on John Campia's show? And it's Raven like the bird. Well, usually my normal schedule is Monday through Thursday. And normally that would be Ashley's as well. That theoretically we're supposed to be on the John Campia show 4 days a week. But like when I have work like this week and I've got something going on, I can't do it. Like next week, Monday and Tuesday, I can't be on the show. I haven't even told John this. I can't be on the show because we have color timing sessions for Tango Shalom from 10 o'clock on. So I have to be at my color timers, the post-production house. And when I say color timing, color grading, or the colorist has been grading the whole movie, and we're finally, the Monday and Tuesday will be done. Tango Shalom will be finished color grading the cut, which will be very, very exciting. I'm very excited about this. So yeah, so that's normally how we would be. That is our normal schedule for the show. And sometimes we can't always make it. Terry says, Rob, thanks for indulging my jokes and serious stuff. I don't know, Terry. I think you and I are kind of birds of a feather when it comes to that. You can't be too serious. I mean, life is. That's why when people say, "Oh, there's too many jokes in the Marvel universe," who's serious 100% of the time? Everyone's always cracking jokes. I mean, even James Bond would have his one-liners. Uncle Remus is here. Since I brought jokes and one-liners. Octopussy, For Your Eyes Only, Moonraker, and even A View to a Kill I can rewatch over and over. By the way, today is May Day. I did post a picture of Grace Jones's character, May Day, on Twitter, because shouldn't you do that? I like Octopussy. I like For Your Eyes Only. I'm a Moonraker apologist, and A View to a Kill, I can't go with that. A View to a Kill is rough for me. Yeah. Don't so. Barnamac is here. For me, it's Connery, Dalton, Lazenby, Brosnan, Craig, and more in terms of characterization. Favorite Bond film, Goldfinger. I think Goldfinger is one of my favorite Bonds. I think From Russia with Love is the closest Bond film to a Fleming novel. But yeah, I mean, I love the early Bonds. I love Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and Thunderball. You Only Live Twice. As much as I enjoy it, and especially as a kid, I loved it. It's a little dodgy now, and I love On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I've gone through all. Why don't I just go through all the Bonds? And then Diamonds Are Forever. Diamonds Are Forever, Live and Let Die, and Man with Golden Gun. Rough for me. Little dated. Spy Who Loved Me, I love. Moonraker, I love. I'm an apologist. For Your Eyes Only, I love. Octopussy, I kind of love. View to a Kill, that's really tough. I love Living Daylights. I think Living Daylights is one of the most underrated Bonds. License to Kill, not a fan. It looks cheap. It was all shot in Mexico. Not that Mexico's cheap, but there wasn't a lot of globetrotting there. They're trying to keep costs down. Then there was the desert of the 6 years during the McClory. The legal rigmarole with Kevin McClory, so there was no Bond film for 6 years. Then we got GoldenEye in '95, which I really liked. It's not top tier, but then we get Tomorrow Never Dies. We get GoldenEye, we get GoldenEye. Then we get Tomorrow Never Dies, which I like. I think Tomorrow Never Dies. There's a lot in it that I really love. Gilbert apparently likes Tomorrow Never Dies too. World Is Not Enough. It's pretty good. I mean, Tomorrow Never Dies and World Is Not Enough. What do you see, buddy? Hey, buddy, what's going on? Somebody's here that he doesn't know. Yo. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. Hey, you okay? You okay? He doesn't like it when people come here that he doesn't know. Gilbert. He's a good watchdog, though. I pity the fool who tries to come in this house when they're not wanted. Gilbert, yo. Sorry about this, guys. Anyway, Farky50 is here. He says, hey, everyone. Finally saw Endgame Sunday night, and I can watch the Burnettwork again. Well, Farky, it's good to have you back. Hey, buddy. Dude. You know, it's funny. We didn't understand where he learned to bark like that. Like, I didn't think that all dogs could bark this loud. I mean, he's got this deep, rumbly bark that it gets crazy. And the funny thing is if somebody were to ever, if he was barking like that and somebody would ever just go, he's the sweetest dog. He'd just go, what? Hey, dude. I'm sorry, guys and girls. Hey. Listen to that. That's crazy. I don't even know where he learned that. He didn't learn it from me. Vesna's here. Hello, Vesna. I want Tony's hot toy with the cheeseburger. They don't make... And if you want a Tony figure, they're all like 400. Hey, Gilbert, come here. Come here, bud. Hey, come here. Come here, dude. It's okay. Don't worry. It's okay. Come on. It's okay. Hey. Oh. Sorry about that. Gilbert, I might have to turn this chat off. he's going a little crazy. But the hot toys for Iron Men are very expensive and they're die cast. So I apologize for that barking. He's he doesn't usually do this. This is sort of a new thing for him to bark this much. I mean, not a new thing, but he's barking. So I'm sorry. Darth Suthius says, yep, I also pre-ordered the Ronin statue from Iron Studios. Not sure how I'll explain it. Explain all these old items that will magically appear in our closet. Well, as some of you know, I was married for a while. and there's something that would happen. You know, there's I think all collectors know that there, especially with significant others that you live with, you at one point you just have to come clean. But there is a bit of hiding things. I don't do it anymore. But yeah, I went through a period of time where I'm like, I don't know where that came from. I don't know where it was. It was in the garage. Although now the things that are actually in the garage are really in the garage because I don't buy things the way I used to buy them. And I have a ton of hot toys that are still boxed. Like I have every Wolverine. There's 4 Wolverine hot toys they've released. I have them all. They're all in the garage. But they didn't make. Would you, Gilbert? He's looking at me in the mirror now. He doesn't. They never made a Wolverine from Logan, which I thought was a bummer. Alexander Wilson says, you said Netflix would have trouble luring creators, but they already have Ryan Murphy, Shonda Rhimes, and Kenya Barris, who have proven track records. Okay. Those deals were already made years ago, actually. Not many years ago, but fairly recently. Now, what I have been talking about, there's been a lot of chatter, not just amongst film pundits, but also in Hollywood with people that are creating shows. Netflix is now, there's an article in the Hollywood Reporter today. I tweeted it out. It was Norman Lear and Rita Moreno, and they were talking about the cancellation of the revival of One Day at a Time after 3 seasons. Now, as many people know, Netflix is a publicly held company, and they keep borrowing money. Gilbert, please stop. You never usually do this. Come on, dude. Stop. You got to stop. Stop. So Netflix is a publicly held company, and they've been borrowing a lot of money. Billions. They're billions of dollars in debt. They're carrying an enormous debt load, and they keep increasing that debt load. And so the idea is what is happening, they only get so many subscribers. They only have so many subscribers, and they only get a certain amount, and they're only going to get a certain amount. And they have to, their business model is such now that they have a show for 3 years, and then it comes time to renew based on their contracts. To renew the contracts, and everybody's contracts goes up. They have to spend more money. And as far as their model is concerned, what's happened with Netflix is, because they don't have water cooler shows like Game of Thrones that go on, they put everything down at once, and they'll get a show like Stranger Things will be talked about for a couple weeks, but then it goes up. Basically, Netflix is this library, and they're filling their shelves with their own books, their own shows. Oh, come on, Gilbert. Hey, I don't know who's here. Somebody's here that Gilbert is not happy about. I don't know why. Well, anyway, so what happens is they don't get any extra value for having a fourth or a fifth or a sixth season anymore. And they're spending a lot of money. $100 million they spent to license Friends for one more year, because that gets a lot of viewership, more than you would think. Their new shows are not getting as much. So there's a lot of economics involved, a lot of wackiness. But the reason I said, if they're only going to make shows that last 3 seasons, a lot of new creators are going to look at that and go, okay, well, if I create a show and it's a hit, it's a big hit, I would hope that it would go on for more than 3 seasons. But if Netflix is going to get rid of, they took over Eric McCormack's show Travelers, the science fiction show Travelers, and it was a co-production. Then for the 3rd season, Netflix took it all. They made 1 season of it and canceled it. So it was canceled after 3 seasons. It was a cool show. I mean, it ended in a place where it could end. The show ended, but they could have gone on. I was curious to see what they were going to do. But so if Netflix is only going to make shows for 3 seasons, it's frustrating for people, that especially when you come out of television, when you start to make real money, when the creators make the real money, is when the show goes beyond, say, 2 or 3 seasons, goes 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons like that. And if they're not going to do that, Netflix is going to be, who wants to just do a show for 3 seasons? If you have a hit show, you want it to go on further. And the thing is, with Netflix, they've borrowed so much money already that they have a shortfall. So they don't want to make shows beyond 3 seasons anymore, because they're spending a lot more money. What they're trying to do is get as many books to put up on their library shelves. Netflix wants to have as much stuff as they can have on their streaming service, but it's a double-edged sword, because people will subscribe if they come up with a Game of Thrones that can run 8 years. So it's very interesting. Now, they made very, very rich deals with a lot of these creators. They locked them in. They paid a lot of money. That's another reason why they were borrowing money. So is it a model? Is it a Ponzi scheme in a way? I mean, are they eventually going to run out of money, and they can only get so many subscribers? And now on the horizon, you've got Disney. A lot of content's going to be pulled. The Fox and Disney movies won't be on Netflix anymore. So things are going to change. It'll be interesting to see how that business model works. Like Disney's debuting their streaming service at $7 a month, and they've got the Fox library, they've got the whole Disney library. They're already making their theatrical division is making a ton of money off their major releases. I mean, Disney really only releases, what are they releasing? 8 movies this year, I think. I mean, look at what Disney's releasing this year. They're releasing, they got Captain Marvel. They have Aladdin. They have Captain Marvel, Endgame, Aladdin, Frozen 2, The Lion King, Episode 9, a couple more. That's huge. They're going to make 5 movies they're going to get $5 billion grosses this year. They've got Captain Marvel, Endgame, The Lion King, Frozen 2, and Episode 9, I think, are all going to make $1 billion. That's insane. I mean, that's a ton of money that they're getting in. So they've got their entire back catalog and all of Fox's back catalog. And now they're going to pick up Hulu. We'll see what happens with Netflix. I just think it's a very odd thing that they're doing. And there's a lot of people in Hollywood that are looking at them. It used to be a great thing that you get on Netflix. And I think, sure, it might still be. But no television creator only wants their shows to go 3 seasons and then be over. They want them to run, especially because, and another thing that Netflix does is they own the world. So you can't sell, a show is licensed out to the rest of the world. So you sell like a license to France, and you sell a license to the UK and Germany, and that's where people make a lot of money. So we'll see how it all works out. It'll be interesting. So I think that Netflix will start having trouble alluring creators to make shows for them if they're only going to run 3 seasons. Let's see. Chief Dog 1100 says, everybody says how Cap got the SS the super serum back Duh, he had all the powers of Thor. Uh, oh no, it's Super 7. Okay. Everybody says how Cap got the shield back. Duh, he had the powers of Thor. Or what is SS back? I don't know what you mean. Powers of Thor. He flew there. I would love to see the convo between him and the Red Skull. Oh, okay. The Soul Stone. Everybody says how Cap got the Soul Stone back. He had the power of Thor. He flew there, and I would love to see the convo between him and the Red Skull. Yes, I do too. How did that go? I mean, can you imagine maybe Captain America being the nice guy that he is, says, look, man, here's the Soul Stone. Can you imagine, would Red Skull be there? Like, once the Soul Stone is gone, does he have to stay there? Like, if you take the Soul Stone, why would you think it would be, can he leave Vormir, like go get a beer or something? Like, what would Red Skull do? Would he be there still? And how do you get the Soul Stone back? I mean, it'd be interesting. I don't know. I think that would be, I don't know how that's going to work, man. But that is interesting. I would love to see that. I don't know how it all works, though. Let's see. Carlos Herrera says, the Sorcerer Supreme returns Captain America to the original timeline as a thank you for returning the Time Stone. Falcon and the Winter Soldier show will be about transition to Captain America. Maybe. I think that could be, that's not a bad idea. I like that idea. Carlos Herrera says the Soul Stone returns, and it has a mind of its own. Knows about her. Oh, the Soul Stone returns Black Widow. It has a mind of its own and knows about her self-sacrifice. Loki transported into Thanos' ship and came along back to the OG timeline. I don't know about all that. Because remember, the people that die. I think once you sacrifice somebody into the Soul Stone, they don't go anywhere. They're dead. I think they're gone. Gamora's gone. And we don't have Gamora back. That's not the Gamora that died, and that's dead. I don't think you can. Once somebody dies, they're gone. I don't think you can go back. You can either pull them out of a different timeline or something. I think. I mean, I don't know, but I think once somebody's sacrificed for the Soul Stone, there's no coming back for them. They're gone. And I think, why not? The idea that I think once but that doesn't mean we've seen that they can come out of a timeline. And I don't mind that because we've seen that a lot in comic books. Jared McBride says, will Tony's daughter have a big role in the MCU in the future? I don't know. I think she's a little young. Maybe she could become Ironheart. I don't know. I'm really curious. I mean, I honestly don't think, I think that Thor, clearly they wanted Thor to stick around, but I think Captain America and Tony Stark at least Steve Rogers and Tony Stark are done. And they're going to move forward. Look, they got the Eternals coming. They got Shang-Chi coming. I think they're going to build up a new set of characters, and we'll see how they go. But I think it's great because it's new. We're gonna get new stories, and they're gonna expand and get more cosmic, which is what I think Kevin Feige always wanted to do anyway, because he's a Star Trek fan. So we'll see. I mean, it's again, I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. Well, listen, everyone, I'm going to bring this chat now to a close because, Gilbert's finally calmed down. I'm sorry, Gilbert was a little wiggy. I have work to do, and I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. I want to thank Lucky Tiger, men's grooming products. I keep saying Lucky Strike, too. Those are cigarettes. It's different. Lucky Tiger men's grooming products for men who want to look good and feel great. Thank you for the support of this channel. And by the way, for you people, I do highly recommend their products. Their premium line is really great. They're organics. Anybody here who wants that product line can go to getluckytiger.com, and you can use the coupon or type in the code PGS for Post-Geek Singularity and get 20% off your order. But I want to thank everyone for being here. I will be back tomorrow, and I'll be on the John Campea show beginning at 9 a.m. And remember, everyone, and all those new subscribers, I have so many new subscribers. I want to thank you all for being here. And I want you to remember that every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you need to do is listen. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the ongoing support. And what do you guys think of the Willow TV series? I mean, I was like, they're making a Dark Crystal series. I'm all about that. Willow, I don't know. But now I'm going to have to watch it just because they've made it. I think it's crazy they've made a Willow TV series. What do you guys think? Subscribe, like, hit that little bell. But I want to know mostly what you guys think in the comments section. Sorry, this was kind of a rambling chat all over the place, but and Gilbert was wailing like a banshee, but he is part of the show. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys and girls and gentle beings and aliens and whatever, wherever you come from, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going. I'm glad to have you here and for you to add your voice to this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. And I will see you again tomorrow.